freight efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.
In episode 33, we're joined by Ade Thomas, founder of Green Dot TV Media, where he shares his thoughts about an interesting thing he calls building the ideas infrastructure. We also talk about the exciting opportunities for moving the transportation sector into the smart business era, where vehicles are problem solvers. And we also talk about the cost savings of battery electric vehicles, how outside sources are helping to change trucking, World EV Day, and together we share our thoughts on the importance of creative storytelling. Today we have joining us Ade Thomas. He's founder at Green Dot TV Media, and he leads a few events called World EV Day, the EV Summit, and the EV Bike Summit. Looking forward to hearing about those. Hello, Ade. Thanks for joining us.
Hi there, Mike. Great to be on the podcast. Thanks very much indeed for having me.
Yeah, really looking forward to this chat. And I'm really excited to hear about World EV Day. I mean, just that it just sounds so cool and timely and important. But before we get started, this podcast is for my friends and I, and as the title suggests, and we've not known each other for too long, but it sure feels like that. I mean, we're kind of a kindred spirits in this green vehicles work. Having known me for a little bit here, would you agree with that?
Totally. I mean, we both, share a clear agenda for shifting to a zero emissions transport form. I suppose you might share my vision in terms of the work that I do. I like to think that I'm helping to build out what I call the ideas infrastructure. So, those helping to, create the ideas and the education framework for turning the dial on a shift to zero emissions transport.
Yeah, it's an interesting, that ideas piece and getting collaboration and communication. I mean, I think the world's smaller than it's ever been, and we've got more opportunity to collaborate. I mean, the pandemic's got us doing things, remotely in a really efficient, interesting way. But also that's still our biggest challenge, right? Is getting the right players who have good ideas to work together and really make these things happen. Sort of walk the talk, not talking the talk. But why don't you walk us through your career a little bit, Ade, and kind of what was the spark for you to focus really on green vehicles now?
I'm more a green person than I am a car person or a trucks person. So, it was that sustainability prism, an early concern about climate change that led me to thinking, we really need to focus on solutions. And also being a marketing person, the automotive sector is a really powerful way of visualizing a very positive change in terms of decarbonizing and one of the most important sectors. And the transport sector contributes a third to all CO2 emissions. So I was really keen to focus on that sector because it offers a really great prism into changing people's behavior in a really positive way.
That's interesting. My career's been more on the whole vehicle side, mainly on big trucks, but also smaller trucks. And when I think about transport and vehicles, it's just there for us. It's not, and part of, I think, what's our problem in transforming it to decarbonizing transport is that first of all, our cars are very personal and private. From a goods movement standpoint, we don't like trucks. They get in our way on the motorways and freeways, but they bring everything we want and need to our homes and businesses and so forth. So transportation's got this air about it that is kind of like almost like leave it alone. And that's probably a big challenge for both of us as we try to do our work in green in it. Does that resonate with you?
I mean, I see a really exciting opportunity for fundamental change that is happening very, very quickly at the moment. I think we're in the white heat of a transition, both across the energy sector and the transport sector, and entering a new smart era. Add in digitalization to that mix, and we'll move from a sector in transportation that was a problem in terms of emissions, causing dirty air in cities and climate change globally, to a new smart business near future where we can look forward to the vehicles that we drive being problem solvers, not problem makers.
Change, I mean, this is a classic, right? Is the change going to be evolutionary? People say a step change, or is it going to be revolutionary, where a little bit of it at a time? And I would say transportation and maybe I'll be more specific, trucks, it's been a little bit at a time. I mean, very proud of how clean the diesel exhaust is after, 2 decades of pretty significant things and controls on engines. But I'm with you. I think we're going to see a step change here. We're going to see electrification, cars and small trucks. We're going to see what you just mentioned around connectivity and everything. And I wasn't so sure about that maybe a couple, 2, 3, 4 years ago. But I see it coming.
I mean, the last 18 months we've lived through the COVID era. History tells us that a crisis accelerates the future. The rapid acceleration of e-mobility is clear to see in the numbers, particularly maybe in Europe, where perhaps we're a little ahead of the game. I think 1 in 4 vehicles now sold in the UK has a plug. That's a radical hockey stick step change. The truck sector is a little bit behind that, and maybe the US is a little bit behind Europe. But I think, there's going to be rapid and fundamental change. A real paradigm shift is occurring. I genuinely think we're in the white heat of a major transition. So if anyone isn't thinking about their trucks fleet going over to a zero emissions vehicle fleet, then I think they need to start thinking about that pretty quickly.
Yeah, we're seeing that. As I and my team goes out into the trucking, whether we're visiting with fleets, manufacturers, at conferences, it started for me again, maybe 5 years ago where, I was like, really? I mean, a battery haul freight. But I think what we've seen in the last couple of years, and I've been surprised at how many fleets and manufacturers, state regulators, even utilities, are taking your advice, Abe, and getting involved. They're becoming educated. They're figuring out what part of their fleet can go this route faster than other parts of their fleet. It's not. I mean, there's still a lot of head in the sand that'll be deer in the headlights, to throw out a couple of analogies there for many. But it is happening, and the industry and governments are taking their actions.
Yeah, I mean, this week here in the UK, and I think it's a rare example of the UK government actually being a real pathfinding leader in this sector. It just announced its transport decarbonisation strategy, and in that, for the first time, it outlined a policy shift whereby by 2040, vans and trucks do need to be zero emissions. That's a pretty bold target. 2030, cars need to be zero emissions. So, in pretty much 8 short years' time, it's going to be illegal to sell a combustion engine vehicle here in the UK. And in 18 years' time, the same will apply to trucks. I think there's a really interesting moment where the changes within the sector are not coming from the usual internal forces. So internal forces usually dominate change within an industrial sector, innovation, science, new technologies. The change now is coming from outside. It's coming from essentially climate change. When you have 120 people killed across a few days in Germany due to extreme weather events, that's going to cause the German government to introduce new policy, and that's going to cause major change within the transport sector. I'm absolutely sure of it.
I hear you. And I think, vehicle engineering, whether it's cars or trucks, I mean, a long-term product strategy used to be 10 years, no, 5 years. A long-term strategy would be 5 years. And now with this, I think what will help us get through this step change, this transformation, this big change will be that certainty that it's happening. So when I fell in love with fuel economy was back when I was finishing my time at Navistar. I was there 13 years helping design big trucks, and I got into fuel economy because fuel prices were high for North America, and fleets were demanding more fuel efficient trucks. And what I discovered was that a lot of technologies and innovations happened every 10 or 15 years in trucking when fuel prices went up. And as soon as fuel prices dropped, and you have a little different situation in Europe where those fuel prices are more stable with, regulated pricing on fuel. But when those fuel prices dropped, and we're talking about serious drops, $4 diesel and gasoline down to $1 or $1.50, then everybody sort of just ignored fuel economy. They ignored these technologies that could help us. And that was uncomfortable for me. So I went and started this work. Just to try to bridge that. I mean, we need it. So my point is that I think you're right in that external forces, internal forces, public opinion, climate, cost, all these things are kind of coming together drive companies to act with a longer product strategy plan, and but acting urgently, to introduce models and get on with things. Pretty interesting time.
Totally. I mean, I've mentioned some of the external push forces, but some of the internal pull forces. You look at lower maintenance costs, lower fuel costs. I do some work with Volta Trucks, the exciting 16-ton battery electric startup. They ran some numbers in the week. They calculate that if a truck covers 40,000 kilometers a year, fleet operators with diesel costs would expect to spend around 44,000 euros on diesel, and only around 8,000 euros on electricity. So huge cost savings for battery electric versus diesel.
Yeah, sometimes I share those big dollars spent on fuel for these trucks, and I'll have people not believe me. But it's simple math, right? It's they're hauling tons of freight and doing it. It takes a lot of fuel to consume. So let's get into some of the work you do. Tell us about Green Dot TV Media. What's its sort of mission, and how long has it been around, and what are you doing right there to help this whole process?
Yeah, so well, all of a sudden we've been around for 14 of your Earth years, so we're a pretty long-established player in the sector. We work across a wider remit than just transport, so we look at the whole spectrum of sustainability issues. But we do have a really strong focus on transport. So around 8 years ago, we began working with people like the UK government and Nissan on the Nissan Leaf, one of the early electric vehicles. 4.5 years ago, as you alluded to in your intro, we began building out what is now the EV Summit, which we like to think is the Davos for e-mobility, so the world's meeting place for high-level business leaders in the e-mobility sector. And you referenced that last year we launched, in partnership with ABB, the global engineering firm based out of the US, World EV Day, which was a huge off-the-scale global success for us, with a global media reach of 1.9 billion, and really did help to catalyze a shift towards electric vehicles, which we were super pleased about.
Very cool. And so, I think, as we've sort of brainstormed the work here at NACFE and what you're doing at Green Dot TV, I mean, this whole idea of, sharing information for collaboration, creative stories, telling stories that mean something. And so how does Green Dot TV approach sort of, I don't know what I want to call it, like messaging or the work you do that leads to impact, leads to action? How do you bridge that?
So, I mean, storytelling is a key word for us. I'd add in creativity to that, so creative storytelling. But as I mentioned, we're doing our part to build out what I call the ideas infrastructure. So the channels and the campaigns that are driving engagement around zero emissions in the transport sector. So, World EV Day is a great global campaign, in fact, a movement, causing real change worldwide. I mean, the thing that I referenced about World EV Day being a success last year was a US van driver, actually, who posted to his Instagram feed on World EV Day a picture of him holding his baby daughter in his arms, saying, he was really super excited that World EV Day had come into being, because it meant that, there are platforms, movements for change out there that are going to lead to a better world for his daughter to grow up in. So that's the kind of thing that makes me really excited about the work that we do.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Once we get to the sort of the heart of the matter, I suppose, or get into our real motivations, then that comes actions, that comes things. So what will how does anybody, maybe some of the audience listening here, get involved in World EV Day, and what's the real? It's in September, I think. What's sort of the how do we get involved? What outcomes are you looking for from it? A little more detail.
Sure. So people can partner up with us here at Green TV Media directly. And that would be great. I'd welcome any overtures from some of the organizations you work with and for, but also people can get involved with their own activities on the ground at a grassroots level. So, if people want to engage their own communities with campaigns on the day, great. We have our own campaign assets around a campaign called EV Love, where people can download a bunch of assets from the World EV Day website to create their own campaigns around the EV Love campaign mantra. So there are a bunch of things, really, either top down or grassroots, bottom up ways of getting involved.
So electric bikes, electric cars, electric trucks, and you talked about your specific involvement with Volta. What
Mhm.
do you think? How will trucking, whether it's the drivers or the maintenance or the owners, I mean, what are they going to experience as they start to look into, purchase, operate electric trucks? I mean, what do you see happening? I mean, what are the benefits, challenges as trucking looks to electrify?
I think the interesting thing is that moment of transition. People are really, I call it the heavyweight of legacy interests. People have a real sense of knowing what they already know, and trusting that framework that they already work with. But once you make the transition over to battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell powered vehicles, you'll experience a whole new world of wonder. I mean, it's just a more relaxing, comfortable drive, a drive where you know that you're not causing a problem, you're part of the solution. Your vehicle will have much lower maintenance costs. They just don't go wrong. There are so few moving parts in an electric vehicle compared to a diesel or combustion vehicle. Lower fuel costs, as discussed. It's just a whole new world of experience. You'll have data driven, digitalized systems. It's just a smart form of business, as opposed to a world where perhaps it wasn't quite so smart in the diesel and combustion age.
Yeah, what you're saying is very much in line with what we're hearing from the participants in Run on Less Electric. So we're in the middle of Run on Less Electric, 13 fleets and 13 different truck OEMs we're showcasing, and we're out talking to the drivers and so forth. And on, we knew these trucks are quiet, right? So everybody says these trucks are quiet. You'll love them because they're quiet. But what we're starting to hear, Aid, is like below, more detail around that. So one driver was an Anheuser-Busch truck driver in LA, told me a couple weeks ago, he was bringing up the quiet nature of the truck, and he says, I just feel a lot safer driving it. And I was, my mind kind of went, well, wait a minute, I'm not so sure I get it. And then he quickly said, without me even prompting him, the other day there was an ambulance coming up behind me, and I was able to hear it, recognize it, give it the right of way. And, I felt safer with that truck or that ambulance on the road. The ambulance is certainly getting to, their plate, whatever they're going faster. And so, a detail there. And the other thing you mentioned that struck me is the digitization, the openness, and so forth. I mean, diesel trucks can communicate, and they do. I mean, we've got telematics on these trucks. Diesel trucks are called data warehouses by many of the IT world. And so it's happening, but it's had to evolve over being a mechanical engine for a long time. And the purely electronic electric truck, offers a smoother pathway to this digitization and data and big data and analysis and all that. And I do think that's leapfrogging, where we've been. I mean, all these trucks that we're seeing out there have a tremendous amount of information coming back to the fleet, to the truck builder, and that'll only help that electric truck improve. So I really agree with a lot of those things you rattled off, fairly top of mind and quickly, and totally agree, I think.
I mean, just it's slightly, coming at it from a kind of, someone who's has a pure interest in battery electric vehicles. It seems to me with a diesel engine vehicle, you've got a dumb system that might have a smart system of telematics on top of it. But why not have a smart system of a clean engine that has fewer moving parts, lower maintenance costs, much lower fuel, doesn't pollute? Why not have? It seems to me that there's a synergy between having a smart propulsion system and a smart digitalization system.
Absolutely. And so, a couple of the challenges, that are out there. I mean, one of the big ones is infrastructure. So, on the positive side, what we're hearing is, boy, I just love it. You plug it in, you get home, park, plug it in. When I say home for trucks, that would be back to the base depot or something like that. But, drivers are telling us to get in, plug it in, turn to look at the charger. If it's green, I go home. Versus, coming back to the depot, getting in a fueling line, having to fuel up, probably talking to somebody, These big trucks, you got to move them around the yard. So, even if the fueling is private at the depot, it still takes time and energy, and the drivers sort of love it. But getting there can be a real challenge. And so what's your experience with, well, I guess, it's a little easier with cars and bikes with the small amount of electricity we need, but when you get into these big trucks, there's a lot of it. So how do you view the challenge of fast, big chargers, a lot of power, dealing with the, utilities? What have you learned in the work you're doing to help advise people as they start to think about that big challenge, really?
I mean, charging infrastructure has typically been a challenge, but the amount of money pouring into the charging infrastructure sector at the moment is enormous. I spend a lot of my time talking to investors as well, and investors feel really comfortable investing in charging infrastructure. It's a happy place for them, and the DC fast charging is coming on at pace, so this problem is being solved in real time, at pace, super quickly. I think people really need to understand that there is a huge paradigm shift, that we are in the white heat of a really rapid transition. There's not just the increase in fast charging, there's a fast charge towards fast charging, and people need to be mindful of that and totally aware of it.
A fast charge to fast charging. If I use that, do I have to quote you, or am I okay using that as my own?
I thought of it just right now. So yeah.
I talked a little bit earlier about the modesty of trucking. I may not have used those exact words, but it's sort of, supply chains, goods movement. We just get the coffee, the tea in the morning, the clothes to the stores, the food to the groceries. I mean, we just go about it. And the pandemic, some of that was challenged with, truck drivers in, dangerous situations, really trying to get the goods places. But I think the same thing holds with electricity. I mean, the whole grid and the utilities and the electricity system, it's just there for us. And of course, you've got the Texas event in the winter and California at times that pop up. But these things we know how to do. So this is a transformation, but it's a transformation of things that are kind of known. Does that make sense, or you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, the other component is, we talked about hardware and we talked about vehicles and charging infrastructure. What we haven't talked about is the software side and the smart charging side. So, this is going to enable charging to happen in a really smart way. So dynamically, with excess energy in the grid, when you can charge less expensively, it's going to ensure that the grid doesn't fall over. So there's a lot of really exciting work being done by some pretty clever people in the smart charging space. Again, I referenced the UK government's transport decarbonisation plan that was published just a few days ago this week. That is asking for all charging infrastructure to be smart charging enabled. So there are all these things coming together to create what hopefully will be a very happy place for this super rapid transition to zero emissions transport.
Yeah, and we're running out of time, Ade. We always do. Really interesting discussions, and I think sort of the icing on the cake here is that all of this has a lot of excitement around decarbonizing this transportation sector. You said how excited the investors are in infrastructure. I mean, we're seeing incredibly talented people come into companies like Daimler and Cummins and traditional trucking firms, but we're just seeing with this future a lot of talent coming in. So the people, my point is, maybe we'll close with this and you can add a few final thoughts, but the people doing this work are passionate, capable, excited, professional, and really driving it. And that's a really exciting thing.
Yeah. I mean, the smart kids coming out of US universities with PhDs at the moment, what are they going to go into? They're going to go into cool new professions like zero emissions transport.
So I'm looking forward to continuing the work that you and I do together, or basically keeping in touch, because again, I feel like we're kindred spirits. We go about it in the same way, with how we tell the stories to really drive that are out there to help expedite and drive this faster, quicker. And so great talking to you, Ade. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks very much indeed, Mike. Great chatting to you too. And thanks very much indeed for inviting me onto the podcast.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.